Well, the story of Hightower all started in 2018. I was hunting a 5.5-year-old buck we called Wide Buck, and I was lucky enough to connect on him during Indiana's gun season. That year we really didn't have anything crazy we were after. I had a whole bunch of trail cameras out, and mid-December I decided I was gonna make the rounds, pull cards, check all the cameras, and just see what was running around. One of the farms I really didn't hunt very hard at all had some really interesting pictures. And one 3.5-year-old buck in particular really caught my attention. He was clearly a younger deer, a lot of potential. Even as a 3-year-old buck, he was already beginning to sport, some decent length on his G2s and 3s. And the name Hightower just came to mind, and it stuck pretty quick. As I collected the rest of my cameras off that farm, I noticed he was very active and visible all of November. And he really liked to travel the same couple of trails. I mean, he was very easy to cam. He was very easy to get a lot of pictures of. Next year, 2019, we knew Hightower had made it through, and we were super eager to catch some velvet pictures and see what he turned into. And he gave us one quick look at the end of July, but made us wait until October to really show us he'd become a really solid 4-year-old. He developed into a tall, really solid buck. We figured in the 40s, maybe 50s, and we decided he'd make the hit list that year as a 4.5-year-old. It wasn't until about November 9th I had my first experience with Hightower. Good buddy decided to film me, and we went back to one of our best stands. Fairly windy afternoon, we were able to slip in undetected. He climbed up first, and as I was getting ready to climb, he whispered down to me, "Hey, Hightower, 50 yards. And I turned, and all I could see was some of Hightower's tines kind of sticking up in some thick brush. And I froze up, and we were able to catch a little bit of footage of him. Not the best footage, but we were able to get some, and he ended up getting up out of his bed, chasing off a doe, and that was really the first encounter. Shortly after that encounter, I had my second close call with Hightower. I was hunting really close to a neighbor's property that does not hunt at all. And I was waiting for him to jump the fence and give me, honestly, a 5-yard quartering away shot. But much to my surprise, he actually showed up that first sit, and he walked up and down the neighbor's fence just on the neighbor's side at 4 yards. And it was an agonizing few minutes, but I just had to sit there and watch him and respect the property line. He never jumped the fence, and he lived to evade me, lived another day. Gun season rolls around, and we all hunt Hightower pretty hard, but don't really have him patterned at this point, and we're just kind of guessing where he might be, and I didn't end up seeing him the whole rest of gun season. He showed up once or twice in December, which would have been muzzleloader, but he had already moved back to his summer range at that point where we don't really have a lot of stands. The pictures became less frequent, but we did end up getting a few images late January that proved once again he found a way to survive. Mid-February, I get a call from my buddy asking if I'm willing to make a trade. He wants to trade some of my hunting equipment in exchange for any deadheads or sheds that he finds this winter, and he's usually good for 1 or 2 solid finds. So I told him it was a deal, and never would I have guessed that just 2 weeks later he would actually find Hightower's left side in perfect condition just shortly after it was dropped. To make the shed story even crazier, another friend of mine was riding around on his UTV in a waterway and hit something, got out, only to find it was Hightower's right side, also in perfect condition, a little bit of bleaching from the sun, but no chew marks, no breaks at all. He was generous enough to gift it to me 2 years later. Now we're in our 3rd year after this guy. He's now a 5.5-year-old mature buck, and we doubled our efforts to try to pattern him, and we start getting a few pictures on our Reconyx cameras, a few videos on our Ridgetechs. This time as a 5.5-year-old, he really blew up. He put on a lot of inches, became a very impressive buck, and in my mind, he was starting to approach Boone, and we thought this was a really good opportunity to get a Boone and Crockett buck. Beams were long, great mass, tine length had always been there, and spread was there as well. I had 6 or 7 close encounters with Hightower in 2020, was not able to seal the deal. He was fairly hidden in gun season, and He stayed just out of range most of bow season. My bow encounters with him were 60, 70, 80 yards all the time. Each encounter was a story of its own, but one story that really sticks out clear was November 9th, 2020. I was hunting deep in a doe bedding area, loaded with sign, and I get a call from my wife early in the morning that she's not feeling well and she needs help at home. And she really never calls when I'm hunting, so I knew it had to be pretty bad. I got down right away, packed up, headed back to the truck. About 100 yards from my stand, I kick up a buck, and he looks back at me, and sure enough, it's Hightower. And we locked eye to eye for a little while, and he took off towards the highway. And you wouldn't believe it, there's a semi-truck barreling down the highway, and Hightower is headed right for the highway, and that semi-truck slammed on its horn, slammed on the brakes, and from my view, it looked like Hightower was about to get blasted, but just barely missed. And I ended up seeing Hightower in the field on the other side of the highway, kind of bound off in the distance. And I thought, man, what an ending that would have been right there to see him get hit by a truck. So I have several other encounters with Hightower. Ultimately, I'm unable to seal the deal. And now just begin to wait for that late January picture. Let us know he made it, let us know he survived, and begin prepping for the next year. January 31st, I finally get confirmation he made it through and begun all the preparation for the next year. Sadly, Hightower did not show up during the 2021 velvet season, and I started to wonder if something might have happened. As a 6.5-year-old now, I wondered if his range would really shrink or patterns would change. I decided to pack up the kids and wife, and we headed out scouting to see if we could just possibly lay eyes on him. It didn't feel super realistic, but we thought we'd give it a shot. We pulled up to one of my favorite spots, and sure enough, Hightower was 150 yards away, staring right at the van, right at our whole family, and we got a chance to get eyes on him. And right as we did that, he ended up walking in front of my cameras, and I have a great picture of him from that. This year he was much bigger. Figured surely he would break that magic 170 mark, and sure enough he did. During bow season, I again had many close encounters with Hightower. Nothing really compares to November 5th though. I decided to hunt one of my best stands in the afternoon, and I was walking down the trail in a very dense part of the woods, and I stumble on Hightower 15 yards in front of me, and he looks up at me, and you can tell something's wrong. He starts to stomp his feet a little bit, starts to swivel his head. He's on high alert, but ultimately he didn't spook. We stared eye to eye for what seemed like 5 minutes or so. After a few minutes, he just kind of lost interest and started chasing a doe around, and it allowed me to slip up into the stand. Coming face to face with Hightower at 15 yards was one of the craziest experiences of my hunting career. It's just something I can't explain, to be that close to an animal you've been after for such a long time. Finally, fast forward to November 20th, and my wife is a day or two past her due date for our daughter, Tessa. Sitting around all day, twiddling our thumbs, my wife tells me, go out and hunt, get out, get some fresh air, and see if I can get Hightower. And much to my surprise, I was heading out to the stand. By about 2:30, I was all set up and ready to go. Again, I was sitting in one of my favorite stands for Hightower, and my two good friends were also hunting, one to the west a few hundred yards and one to the east a few hundred yards. And it was about 5 o'clock, I hear a thud. I turned my head to see Hightower had just jumped the fence from the neighbors, was with a group of does about 75 yards away. And I turned around, sat down on the shooting rail, took my shooting sticks, and I just tried to calm myself down as much as I could. After 4 years, it just became a little bit surreal. I put an excellent shot on him. He went down immediately, and 4-year journey had just come to an end. One of the most incredible parts of this story, though, is yet to come. An hour after the shot, I get a call from my mother-in-law that my wife's water broke, and I needed to head back to town. And they were gonna head to the hospital if I wasn't home within an hour. So I had to get everything sorted out as quickly as possible. My wife's water had broken just moments prior. I would have missed out on this incredible opportunity to harvest Hightower. And I had him officially Boone and Crockett scored. He came in at 179 inches gross. He netted 175 and 2/8. which made him one of the top typical Boone and Crockett bucks taken in Indiana, 2001. You know, one of the big morals of this story is you have to be persistent. You have to keep at it. It took 4 years for me to connect on this deer. It took persistence. It took a lot of scouting, a lot of time and effort. But as someone who grew up on the East Coast and never had even seen a deer like this until moving to the Midwest, I just want to say it's possible if you put the work in. You can make it happen.